Roughly 1 in 10 humans is left-handed. That number hasn't changed in 500,000 years. Think about that. Every generation, every continent, every civilization. 10%. That's not random. That's a signal. And for decades, scientists couldn't explain it. Left-handedness seemed like a defect, a mistake in the wiring, something evolution should have ironed out long ago. But it didn't. And the reason why is stranger than anyone expected. Your handedness is decided before you're born. By week 10 of pregnancy, a human fetus already has a preferred hand. It sucks that thumb. It moves that arm more. The choice is made before your first breath, before your first word, before you ever picked up a pencil. For most people, that choice is the right hand. And the reason is deep in your DNA. A gene called LRRTM1 helps determine which side of your body becomes dominant. In most humans, it tips the scales right. The left hemisphere of the brain takes control of language, tool use, fine motor skill. But in about 10% of people, something shifts. The dominance isn't as clean. The right hemisphere plays a larger role, and the hand that emerges as dominant is the left one. For most of human history, this was seen as a curse. The Latin word for left is sinister. In French, it's gauche, meaning clumsy, wrong, out of place. Cultures across the world forced left-handed children to switch. Teachers tied left hands behind backs. Parents slapped knuckles. The assumption was that left-handedness was a flaw, an error, something to be corrected. But here's what those cultures didn't understand. Flaws don't survive 500,000 years. In evolutionary biology, there's a concept called negative frequency-dependent selection. It sounds complicated. It isn't. It means, when a trait becomes rare, it gains an advantage. And when it becomes common, that advantage disappears. This is exactly what happens with left-handedness. In 2004, researchers Charlotte Faurie and Michel Raymond published a landmark study. They looked at traditional societies, 9 of them, across 4 continents. They measured 2 things: the proportion of left-handers in each group and the rate of violence in that group. The correlation was almost perfect. The more violent the society, the more left-handers it produced. In the Yanomamö of Venezuela, one of the most conflict-intensive societies studied, nearly 23% of the population was left-handed, more than double the global average. Why? Because in hand-to-hand combat, left-handers win. Picture 2 fighters, one right-handed, one left-handed. The right-handed fighter has spent his entire life sparring against other right-handed opponents. He knows the angles. He knows the rhythms. His body has memorized how a right-handed opponent moves. Then he faces a left-hander. Everything is mirrored. The punches come from the wrong side. The stance is unfamiliar. The muscle memory fails. The left-hander, meanwhile, has spent his whole life fighting right-handed opponents. He's adapted. He knows their patterns. He's the specialist. The right-hander is the generalist. This is called the fighting hypothesis. And it's one of the most compelling explanations for why left-handedness has persisted in the human population for 500,000 years. In sports today, you can still see it. In boxing, roughly 30% of world champions are left-handed. In baseball, left-handed batters face a systematic advantage against right-handed pitchers. In fencing, tennis, cricket, left-handers are overrepresented at elite levels everywhere. The advantage isn't strength. It isn't speed. It's surprise. It's rarity. It's the fact that your opponent has never quite learned how to fight you. But here's where it gets more interesting. If left-handedness is such an advantage in combat, why didn't it spread? Why didn't natural selection push that number higher? 20%, 40%, 80%? Because the moment left-handedness becomes common, the advantage vanishes. When everyone is left-handed, no one is the specialist anymore. The surprise disappears. The edge evaporates. So the trait stays at exactly the level where it's rare enough to be useful, around 10%. For 500,000 years. Locked in. Stable. Maintained by the mathematics of conflict itself. The human species has been playing this game since before we had cities. Before we had language. Before we had anything except each other, and the need to survive encounters with each other. What does this mean for left-handers alive today? It means you are not a mistake. You are not a glitch. You are a survival strategy. Your brain is wired differently because the population needed you to be wired differently. You are the specialist. The 10% the other 90% never quite figured out. Dr. Daniel Gushwind at UCLA has spent years studying the neuroscience of handedness. His research suggests that left-handers don't just have a different dominant hand. They often have more bilateral brain organization. Language, spatial reasoning, creativity. These functions are more distributed across both hemispheres. This may explain why left-handers are statistically overrepresented in certain creative and strategic fields. Architecture, music, chess, visual arts. Not because being left-handed makes you smarter, but because a brain that doesn't fully commit to one side may be building more connections between the two. There is one more thing worth knowing. The oldest direct evidence of handedness in the human fossil record comes from scratch marks on ancient teeth. Early humans held food in their teeth and cut it with stone tools. The angle of the scratches tells us which hand held the blade. Dating back 500,000 years, the ratio is already there. Already stable. Roughly 90% right, 10% left. 500,000 years ago, before agriculture, before writing, before any civilization we know by name, the human species had already settled on this ratio. It was already locked in. Whatever pressure produced it, whatever ancient calculation the population made in the darkness of prehistory, it worked. It persisted. It's still here, in you, in your children, in the 10% of every classroom, and every country, and every generation that will ever live. Left-handedness was never a flaw. It was a feature, installed 500,000 years ago by the brutal arithmetic of human violence. And it's still running, quiet and unchanged, in 1 out of every 10 people alive right now. You don't inherit your handedness from your parents. You inherit it from every fight your ancestors ever survived.